Playoff fever grips the air. CC Sabathia goes into rehab, and Ichiro takes the mound, maybe for the last time in his career. All this week on MLB This Week podcast. And hello, welcome to This Week in MLB This Week podcast. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And hello, Gary. Playoff fever has gripped the air all around here, especially up there in New York City.
Well, I'll tell you, Rich, it was a crazy Sunday yesterday, and the most entertaining, and probably all of it, was in the AL West, with the Texas Rangers winning the AL West, the Astros securing the second wild card spot, and the Yankees and Pirates locking in to home field advantage, even though the Yankees kind of backed into it. They were swept this weekend, but nonetheless, they obtained the wild card home field advantage, at least for tomorrow night, and should be a good matchup with Tanaka against Kuchar, or however he's Dallas. Kuchar, the 20-game winner for Houston, so it should be a good matchup. And of course, on Wednesday night we'll have the National League wild card game, and that's going to be a fantastic matchup, as it's going to be the Cubs pitching Jake Arrieta, 22-game winner for them, and the Pirates going with Garrett Cole, who won 19 this year. So that is going to be some awesome game. And you know, now the playoffs are all set except for the wild card. I mean, the wild cards are set, but who will St. Louis and Kansas City play when the division series begins remains to be seen. We'll find out in the next couple of days.
Yes, we will. And as you said, some great baseball waits ahead for us viewers and fans of the game. And as you said, the Houston Astros, they're going to take it down to one game now, and they had such a big lead out there in the West for most of the year. It's just amazing to me that they collapsed and fell apart there at the end.
Well, Rich, they're young. They're very young, and look, this has been a successful season for them. They weren't, expected to be in this position until at least next year, maybe the year after that, 2017. So for them to even obtain that second wild card is really an amazing thing, and kudos to their management to really turn this team around and got them going in the right direction, and then made the moves in the middle of the season to help them try to hang on. But again, they're very young. Fatigue may have set in a little bit. It was a hectic pace, and they just had a great year, and it's a great thing for the city of Houston as well as that organization that they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the LA Angels, of course, made a late charge in the West out there in the AL West, but they came up empty. And that team, you have to compare them to the Washington Nationals to me, Gary, with the talent that they have on both teams. And they just can't seem to put it all together there and work as a group to get to the playoffs, let alone do well in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, Rich. The only difference I would say is at least that as an organization has won a title, World Series, and they have gotten past the opening round, whereas Washington, with all the talent in the world there, have not. So it's a kind of a good comparison, but they had some internal problems. If you remember, their general manager, Jerry DiPoto, didn't get along with the manager, and actually he lost that war, the general manager, so he's out. But not for long. He got another job, so he didn't do too bad for himself. But yeah, they're a funny team as well, but they don't have any pitching. It seems they had a couple of pitches, but there's a lot of good pitching out there now, and for a team that's in a race, not to have more than at least two pitchers, it's pretty odd nowadays. And we'll see what happens as time goes on. I'm sure that trend will evolve into something else, but for now, pitching seems to be the key.
Yeah, and I have to go back about 6 or 8 weeks from now when the Angels were looking at a pitcher for the Phillies. I believe it was Cole Hamels or somebody like that. And there was a deal in the works for that, and it all fell through. And I just have to say that, yeah, the Angels were very close to doing something this year, but it was that one piece of the puzzle, perhaps like a guy like Cole Hamels that went over to the Rangers. And now look, the Rangers came out of nowhere, took that division, and it could be just one of those situations where they're destined to make it to the World Series this year. A guy like Cole Hamels has the experience. He's been in many playoff situations. He won the game for him, the last game of the season there. And, good things happen to people that have experience winning in the postseason as well.
Yeah, and like you said, he had plenty of experience with the Phillies, and they made the move to Rangers, and they walk away with the AL West, and it will be interesting. It's going to be an interesting series with Kansas City back in it again this year after their run last year, and Toronto, who had been out of the playoffs for a few years, they're in. Texas, of course, who were out for a few years. Some new faces, fresh faces in there. Houston included, and the Yankees are back in, and we'll see if they can. They got to get past tomorrow night. A new experience for the Yankees. They used to winning a division and continuing on, but this is going to be interesting. This one-game playoff with them. And in the National League, it's going to be fascinating as well. As I said, with the Pirates and the Cubs, that's going to be must-see TV if you're a baseball fan on Wednesday. And then, of course, the Cardinals, the NL Central champs and number one overall seed, they've got home field throughout the NL playoffs, should they continue. And the Dodgers out west, and, of course, that team in the East, my New York Mets, they're going to be out there in California playing those Dodgers, and that's going to be an interesting matchup because you're going to have Greinke and Kershaw probably in the first two games. And the Mets will be sending out DeGrom and Syndergaard in the first two games. How it shakes out, who's against who, we don't know yet. They haven't named that, but we know DeGrom and Syndergaard are going in the first two games for the Mets, and Matt Harvey in the third game. And for L.A., I would imagine, they'd have to be crazy not to start Greinke and Kershaw in the first two games at home.
And that's an interesting thing there. Greinke and Kershaw have not done well in the playoffs. I wonder if that will continue this year.
I hope so, Rich. I certainly do.
I was doing some research the other night. I think Kershaw's got like a 5.56 ERA, and he's like 1-5 in his playoffs. So he hasn't fared well in the playoffs at all. Maybe it's a case of nerves or whatever the case it is, but you can't overlook that if you're looking at the Dodgers. For some reason, he's great in the regular season, but when it comes to the playoffs, he's just totally off.
Well, the thing I would add to that, though, is that it has basically been against one team he's been off, and that has been the Cardinals, I believe. So it could be just a thing with the team matches up good against his stuff. Of course, I'm hoping that it does continue because it would certainly help my Mets progress to the next level of playoffs. So, but it's going to be fun and going to be fascinating to see who comes out of all of this, as it is every year at this time.
Yeah, and here's some stats from Kershaw here. 3 National League championship games. He's 0-3 with a 7.23 ERA in 6 games. 7.23. That's not clutch.
No, it's not. And as you said, Rich, it could be it could be a lot of factors. It could be fatigue. It could be lack of focus in the playoffs. It could be just nerves. He could be a choke artist. I mean, there are a lot of great pitchers in the regular season that just can't pitch in the postseason, and vice versa. There's guys that are maybe 500 pitches or slightly better in the regular season, and get them into the postseason, and they were terrific. You know, Greg Maddux was never that terrific of a postseason pitcher. Glavine was a good postseason pitcher. Talking about the Brave staff there, and Smoltz was fantastic in the postseason. So I guess you never know. It's like that in any sport, and we will see. I hope that it's some kind of trend for the for my fandom possibilities of seeing my team progress, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, and if you have any sick time at work, maybe Friday would be the day to use that, because there's games starting from 12:30 p.m. in the East, running all the way probably to 12:30 in the morning. There's 4 games scheduled, starting again at 12:30. Then there's a game at 3:30, 6:30, and then, of course, as you mentioned, Gary, the Mets taking on the Dodgers out in L.A. with a 9:30 p.m. start here in the East. And that's going to be a late start for us out here in the East.
But thank goodness it's on a Friday night, so we can stay up. I don't work on a Saturday. I know you have to work, Rich, but I can stay up and enjoy my Mets.
That's very good. And, of course, Saturday night's game begins at 9 p.m., and as you said, Syndergaard starting game 2. Did you think that he may start game 2 for the Mets?
Well, it was interesting. I wouldn't have thought that a month and a half ago, but he had they missed his turn. They skipped him one term, and he came back, and his last 3 starts, he probably was the best pitcher on the staff. So I'm not surprised that he is going to start in game 2. And we'll see. You know, it was an I don't want to dwell too much on the Mets, but it was an exciting year here, not only because they won, but to see the growth of a guy like Syndergaard, who came in at 22 years old, 23, whatever he is, and see him actually become a pitcher. You know, he can throw the ball 100 miles an hour, 98 miles an hour, but to see him work on his curveball and his changeup and a slider, and it was really a fascinating thing to see, as well as Jeurys Familia grow into the closer role too. Another thing that was great to see. So it was a terrific season, up and down, but since August it's been fantastic, and we're really ready to go. There's a lot of fever here in New York for the Mets, and the Yankee fans are excited as well, but I don't think a lot of people give the Yankees much of a chance, and especially after the news today, I don't think they're going to lose a lot of support.
Yes, they are. So we're looking forward to the start of the playoffs, and here's some playoff odds directly from Las Vegas for you, Gary. Just got these in an email this morning. Toronto Blue Jays odds-on favorite to win the 2015 World Series at 3-1 out there in Las Vegas. The Kansas City Royals coming up at 5-1. Also, the St. Louis Cardinals are at 5-1. With that in the top few here, the Dodgers at 6-1. New Yorkers, you can put your money on the Mets at 7-1. And how about those Cubbies, Gary, at 10-1 odds to win the 2015 World Series? You can get some money on them out there in Vegas.
Interesting.
So the pennant odds here for the American League, the Toronto Blue Jays are at 3-2. Kansas City Royals 2-1 odds. Texas Rangers, a dark horse, maybe weren't supposed to be there. They're 11-2. Over in the National League pennant, the odds-on favorite, of course, St. Louis Cardinals, 2-1 odds. The Dodgers at 3-1, and then the Mets coming in at 13-4 odds on that. So it's very interesting how these odds makers come up with their numbers, but they usually know something.
Well, as they say, that's why we play the games, and it's played with heart, and we'll see what happens.
And I'd like to thank Jimmy Shapiro, a sports publicist over there at Bovada.lv. He emails me quite a bit throughout the season. Some baseball odds for you that they're offering out in Vegas. So the bettors are liking it. The games will begin, and we can't wait.
No, going crazy already. One day without baseball tonight, and I don't know what to do with myself. That's why we're doing the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're doing the show on a Monday night here. And yeah, as the season progresses in the playoffs, we'll probably pick some prime spots to do our shows when we'll have the most to talk about. And certainly this week, I didn't think we'd have too much more to talk about except the playoffs. But the baseball world never sleeps, Gary. And you have our first story up tonight about Ichiro. We've seen him over the years, but we haven't seen him in this role.
Well, Rich, after bothering pitches to death for the last 15 years or so, Ichiro Suzuki, one of the best hitters in the history of the game, and probably a Hall of Famer, he was able to fulfill his dream of pitching in a major league game when Miami manager Dan Jennings put him on the mound at the bottom of the eighth during a Philadelphia 7-2 win. Ichiro has been lobbying managers throughout his time in baseball, both here in America and in Japan, to allow him to pitch. When he finally got the chance, he threw multiple pitches, including a fastball and a slider. He made it through the entire inning, facing 5 batters. He gave up 2 doubles, 1 earned run, and did not record a strikeout or walk a batter. So, Ichiro gets to make some history of his own, and something he always wanted to do, pitch in a major league game, and there he had it. And Rich, I wonder if you were watching that game against your Phillies.
I was listening to it on the radio. I believe we were out at the time, but yeah, I did hear that Ichiro was in the game, and I was like, wait a minute, Ichiro pitching? But I saw the replay after the game, and yeah, he looked like a bona fide pitcher there in every way. Just seemed like he maybe wants a second career as a pitcher, sort of like a Babe Ruth.
Maybe he's got to develop a knuckleball, he can pitch more.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ichiro living the dream there, lives out something that he always wanted to do. And there's speculation whether or not his career is really over. He keeps himself in great shape. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody picked him up next year.
Well, he played a lot more than he expected to play, I think, this year with once Stanton got hurt. And he was going to be more of a fill-in, and ended up playing, I wouldn't say every day, but played a lot. And, it might have hurt his production and his age. So we'll see. I'm sure somebody might pick him up. He can still hit a little. He can still run. And his defense is still pretty good. So,
yes, he is. So we'll have to see if Ichiro is going to be picked up next year on a team. I'm sure there's some spot for him out there. Moving on with the show here, a shocker this morning. I opened my baseball news here on the computer, Gary, and a real shocker. CC Sabathia going into rehab, just announced this afternoon. Came as a surprise to nearly everybody, but it was really a cry for help from CC. Powerless over alcohol, apparently, and entered himself into a rehab into Connecticut, and will miss the entire playoffs. Very sad news there out of New York. Always hate to hear baseball players, or anybody for that matter, fall under the spell of alcohol or drugs. And Just total surprise from CC Sabathia today.
Well, Rich, don't like to say, don't like the Yankees. Let's just say that. That's obvious. But as you say, this was a complete shock. And it's a man's life you're talking about and his family. And so team loyalty doesn't come into it here. But I'm shocked at a little bit at the timing of it all. Why today and why not a week ago or why not 3 days from now? But I guess the thing that I heard on a radio interview today was somebody that was a counselor, and they said when it's time to go, you know it, and you want to go. And I guess today was Sabathia's time, and his head was in the right place to do this. And as you say, I hope he can kick this and really good, the best of luck to him and his family and battle his way through it. And while I'm at it, let me give kudos to the Yankees for the way that they handle it. And I don't say that a lot during the year, but they really handled it well. And but it's really going to make it hard for them in his postseason because they don't have a lot of pitching, and to remove another pitcher, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, there was a lot of comments about from Yankee fans, I guess, whether or not he could have waited until after the playoffs, but I guess not. I mean, when it goes down to a person not able to cope with the situation anymore, they generally know when it's the bottom for them. Um, he Sabathia did thank the Yankees organization for their encouragement and understanding, and intends to be back with the Yankees next season. So a lot of controversy always seems to circulate around the Yankees. They have A-Rod, who had a great season this year for them, despite his association with uh, performance-enhancing drugs over the years. And now they have this. So it just goes to show you, I guess, money doesn't always equate to a perfect situation over there in Yankeeville.
Well, Rich, I think the point we have to remember is that, as you say, all of this money, but when you think about it, basically they're still a human being, and they still have all the faults and all the frailties that every human being does. It's just that while some people might be good at running a warehouse or a major corporation, he could throw a baseball better than a lot of people. So not really much difference. We do put these people up to star status, but if, in the long run, they're just the same as us. They just have a talent that's different from ours, and but they still have the same problems uh, and as I say, frailties of human life that we all have.
That's true. 25 million would inspire me to be healthy as I could, though. That would be just me, but I'm sure a lot of people would feel the same way. But we're our
Well,
next story up here.
just to go back a second, alcohol it's an addiction. It's a disease, and it's a tough one. Sometimes it gets a hold of you, and I give him more credit than I do a guy like A-Rod, because A-Rod, he took it to build himself up and to play longer, and but this guy has a problem, and he admitted he has a problem, and that's a big part of the battle.
That's for sure. That's always the first step. Well, out in the West, a lot of first steps are being taken. Some managers being fired today, as we were talking about before the show. And you have the next story up about merry-go-round out in San Diego and some other places.
Yes, Rich, it has started, the managerial merry-go-round, as Pat Murphy, the interim manager of the San Diego Padres, has been let go. So he is no longer interim, and he's no longer manager. So he's gone, And also, the news came down today that the Washington Nationals let go of Matt Williams. Not a big surprise here. I know you were a little bit surprised, but I wasn't surprised at all. He had lost the clubhouse and lost the team. And when that happens, forget it. You have no way to go. Also saw across the wire, if I may, that the Brewers, who just let go of their manager in May, he's still there, Craig Counsell, but they let go of 5 coaches. So they're starting to overhaul their team as well. Maybe get some guys in that he's more friendly with, or he can work better with. Those coaches that were fired were holdovers from the previous administration. But you know how it goes, Rich. I mean, you had a managers go in this year in Philly, and but your manager's holding on to his job, right? They named him manager a couple of weeks ago.
They did name McCannon manager for 1 year. They also kept the coaches, which, except for the third base coach and someone else, I believe. But that astounds me. Now, for 2 seasons in a row, the Phillies have been in last place, 30 some odd games back. How can you keep a coaching staff? That astounds me that that happens, because you know that there's something wrong with the coaching staff. They can't seem to turn anything around in Philadelphia. And I just can't believe it, as well as I can't believe Matt Williams being named manager of the year last year. But this year he gets a bunch of powder kegs on his team. Papelbon, #1, stirs up more trouble than you can believe. And now he's out in Washington. I don't think he deserved it. A lot of these guys, as we were talking about before on the show, before the show, Gary, they don't respect the manager. He's 49 years old. He's almost as old as some of these players now. You got Jason Worth out there that is sort of like an island onto himself there. And he's got a lot of individuals out there that don't necessarily play as a team.
Well, Rich, I would agree with you, but he really lost this clubhouse. There was a lot of complaints about communication, for right or wrong. But as a manager, you have certain responsibilities as well. And I think getting Papelbon was probably the final nail in Williams' coffin. But there's a lot of dissension on that team. There's a lot of guys that like Drew Storen and couldn't figure out why they got Papelbon and then took Storen out of the closing role. There are a lot of guys that were let go that were well liked on that team and they held that team together, that because they said they couldn't afford to pay them, and then they turned around and they brought Scherzer in for a huge contract. So there's a lot of finger pointing going on. And when a team starts finger pointing and there's rumors coming out of the clubhouse that the manager don't talk to anybody, I mean, there were stories that he took guys out of lineups and never told them. And they're getting there at game time and getting ready, and then they look at the lineup card and all of a sudden their name's not on it. So there was a lot of little things, and I think it built up. And I think last year, to be honest with you, his first year, I don't think he deserved manager of the year. I thought there were plenty of other managers that did a much better job with their teams. He had a good team, and it was almost like he backed into manager of the year. It would have been something if he couldn't have won it. But I don't think he was a very good manager. There were hints last year that his style and this team, or quite frankly, that he just wasn't a very good manager. There were a lot of rumors last year, and it carried over this year. And I think he just lost this team completely. And whether it be they don't have respect for him, I don't think he earned the respect of them either. We were talking earlier, and I said we have the totally opposite situation here in New York, where if you looked on Facebook the early part of the season, they wanted to hang Terry Collins in the middle of Times Square. and yet the players never stop playing for him. They love this guy. I mean, they will do anything for this guy, and he has their respect because
Yeah,
he's open with them and talks to them, and Matt Williams just never earned that.
and they don't have a lot of superstars like Worth, Papelbon, guys that are making more than they can spend in a lifetime and don't respect the manager. I've seen a lot of players, especially in Philadelphia with Ryan Sandberg. For one reason or another, he had a lot of disrespect on that team, and he couldn't figure it out. That's why he left in conjunction with Andy McPhail being named the president there just days before he quit, Ryan Sandberg. But you could hear the comments after somebody leaves, and I guess that happens in all walks and businesses, but baseball is a little special in itself. It sort of commands respect, but these new style ball players that are making 25 million a year, 20 million a year, they don't respect anybody, not even themselves. Look at Jason Worth. He gets caught speeding doing 100 miles an hour in a Porsche around Washington just a few months ago. He doesn't even respect himself. The guy's not wrapped too tight, so it's not a surprise that Matt Williams is out in Washington. That team has more problems than Matt Williams.
Oh
That's
yeah,
all I can say.
yeah. And but you know, but you look at a team like the Yankees, and who has more higher price talent there, and yet there's nothing coming out about Girardi getting fired, or I mean, he could get fired because management wants him to go, but there's nothing that's coming out about the Yankees complaining about his leadership. So I don't know. I think we're going to differ on this because I don't think Williams ever won their respect. And sometimes you just can't walk in, especially with no managerial experience, and just do things your way, or you have to do it your way. But I mean, you've got to be a communicator. You've got to talk to your players, and I mean, even the Papelbon and Harper, the fight. Matt Williams said he didn't know what anything had happened. He didn't know until after the game. Now you're sitting in the dugout. Okay, these dugouts are bigger than they were years ago, but man, you got to hear there's some kind of scuffle down at the other end of the dugout. Guys are yelling, guys are moving. Those spikes still make noise on the floors. I mean, to say he didn't know anything was going on, that just seemed awful bogus to me. And look, I'm not a Matt Williams fan. I admit it. I said many times that he was not a good manager and then he was going to get in trouble. And that's why it didn't surprise me at all.
Just amazing there. Matt Williams out down in Washington. We'll have to see who they get in for next year. Maybe an older guy, sort of like a Charlie Manuel or a Terry Collins. Somewhere some of these 30-some-year-old players can look up to him more like a father figure than the father they'd like to fight, maybe. So
I think, and they're going to have to get somebody. You know, Davey Johnson had that team winning, and you know, he was a player's manager. He let them go out and play. And I think that's part of the problem. They got the wrong kind of manager. They brought in Matt Williams, who was going to tell them how to do things. Well, you know, you got a team that just went to the playoffs. They lost in the first round, but they just went to the playoffs. They won a division, and now you're going to tell them how to play. And I think this is what the result is. They didn't play for him. They just didn't play for him. They didn't. It just didn't work. It just didn't gel. And, you know, they're going to have to find somebody else that's going to fit better with that team. And, you know, there's a lot of guys. Miami's looking for a manager because their manager's going to go up to be general manager. So there's other teams, too, out there that going to hop on this merry-go-round in the next few days.
Yep, and still it's the players on the field. I went through this a couple years ago with the Phillies with Charlie Manuel. Everybody threw him under the bus. After he left, the players still played bad. It's a lot of it is the players on the field, but they're going to determine if they win or lose most of the time. Little minor skirmishes and things like that are always going to break out on a team, but we'll have to see what happens. And as you said, there's plenty of managers looking for spots now and vice versa. You're listening to MLB This Week. It's the weekly show we bring to you independent, not sponsored by baseball or any major league team. You can tune in at our website at MLBThisWeek.com or over at Baseball Talk Radio. It's the home for great baseball talk shows. And Gary, I think this past week we just added a Cleveland Indians podcast to the mix. Going to try to get more American League teams involved in this, and a nice show there called Tribe Time Now.
Wow. Yes, I noticed that, and I haven't had a chance to listen to those guys yet, but that's a nice get. It's hard to find some of these American League teams that actually have podcasts going on, at least independent podcasts. They all seem to have the official ones and nothing else, but I'm sure you'll find some more, Rich.
Yeah, we're digging through the haystack. Sometimes it's hard to contact these podcasts. So please, if you have a podcast out there and you're listening to our show for some reason, make it a little more easy to contact your show. Give us your email address on your main page. Speaking of email, Gary, if our listeners want to call or contact us, they can reach us right on our website, MLBThisWeek.com. We have a contact page, and you also can email us at talk@MLBThisWeek.com and get in touch with myself and Gary here. If you have a comment or question you'd like us to talk about on the show, just email it in to us. Be glad to.
Yeah, and again, plenty of great podcasts on baseballtalkradio.com. Go check it out. There's something for everybody there.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of managers, Gary, we had another manager take the dugout for the Los Angeles Dodgers the other day in the name of Jimmy Rollins, but he was dressed up in a Tommy Lasorda jersey. He even added some extra fluff around the stomach there to make it seem legitimate, but maybe Mr. Rollins just had his first Hollywood role out there in L.A., taking the form of Tommy Lasorda on the last game of the season, game 162, and kind of hilarious there. He looks like he has a microphone even set up there. It probably recorded it, but pretty hilarious there in L.A. on the last day of the season.
We'll probably see that in a couple of days on MLB Network.
Yeah, made for TV movie there with Jimmy Rollins. Probably had a fun time doing that. Don Mattingly was not far away. He wasn't in the picture most of the time, but they said he was still sort of running the ship. But he named for the second year in a row now an honorary, quote unquote, manager for the Dodgers on the last day of the season. And it always is fun to do when you're having a great season, Gary.
Yeah, that is fun, and they had clinched the home field advantage for the NLDS, so I guess he felt that it was okay to do something like that, and that's fun. And getting that's another manager that could be in trouble if they lose. Who knows? They could get rid of Mattingly, but the players seem to respect him and like him, so. We'll see what happens, but that's a fun thing to do, an honorary thing like that, and just have some fun. After all, that's what it's really all about. It's a business, but boy, you play much better when you're having fun and you're winning.
Yeah, it always seems a lot better. The stands are always full. Seems like it's never going to end, but that's baseball for you. Another story we have lined up for our listeners tonight, Gary. The Oakland A's hire somebody new, an instructor.
Yes, they announced last week that Justine Siegel, who a few years ago became the first woman to throw batting practice for a major league team, will serve as a guest instructor for the club's 2015 Instructional League. Siegel will work with players October 4th to the 17th at the Lou Wolf Training Complex in Mesa, Arizona. The A's are the first major league team to hire a female coach. In 2009, Siegel also became the first woman to be hired as a coach at any professional level when she served as first base coach for the Brockton Rocks, an independent baseball team. She also served as assistant coach for the baseball team at Springfield College from 2008 to 2010. Um, and she was also worked for the A's, which was one of several teams she worked with during the MLB's league-wide domestic violence training. So, uh, breaking through that glass ceiling, Rich, and I wonder how long before we see women umpires and maybe even women players.
Yeah, it's amazing how things change over the years. I think we're still far off into the future for something like that. But as you said, yeah, here and there, I believe there's an NFL referee who is a woman. Yeah, they're coming into the game more and more every day. Very interesting to see how that evolves and how it changes. And going to have to keep an eye on it for our listeners here.
Yes, sir.
So, our last story of the night here is someone that we've been talking about quite a bit this season, and rightly so. Mr. Pete Rose is actually back in the news. No, he hasn't been readmitted back into baseball, but he's partnering up with a venture to open up the Pete Rose Cafe out there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Bar and Grill, I believe it's going to be called Pete Rose Bar and Grill, right on the strip across from the Area Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. And Pete Rose getting back into the limelight. And Gary, I don't know about you, but I think he should have waited until after the first of the year when baseball makes its decision whether or not he's back in baseball.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rich. He just, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's bad timing, especially for that. If it was going to be a baseball camp or some kind of training facility, I'd say okay, but a bar and grill. But you know what? We've discussed this, the whole gambling issue with DraftKings, and baseball's not as clean as they should be either. So, um, like going to any ballpark, there's Budweiser all over the place. So, maybe they shouldn't get on their high horse about it. It's just that his timing just seems to be awful.
Yeah, and it seems like every time he's coming up for some sort of review or decision, he gets involved in these different uh, ventures because he doesn't solely own the bar and grill. He is a partner, and they use his name, obviously, but it's just the wrong time, the wrong place type of thing. And maybe that's Pete Rose's whole problem throughout this ordeal he's been through. He's doing the wrong things at the wrong time.
I think you're onto something there, Rich. And then, maybe you should have called it Pete Rose Restaurants or something, instead of bar and grill. I mean, if you're going to serve food, call it a restaurant. At least you can get away like saying, well, no, it's like an Applebee's, a family restaurant, But we
Exactly. Yeah.
call it a bar and grill.
Something a little more positive.
Exactly. That word bar is just the thing that throws me, and you can almost picture Manfred sitting in his office in New York City going, "Oh man, why did he got to do this now?"
Rolling his eyes.
Helping him, and now is not the right time.
We'll have to see. And late news, I don't know if we mentioned this on the last show, but Manfred did issue a statement that he will be reviewing Pete Rose's application to get back into baseball, and he will have a decision by the end of the year. So could be good news, could be more of the same news for Pete Rose, but at least for now, by the end of the year, we'll have a decision on it from the new man in charge in baseball. And as you said, Gary, I think baseball has come a long way, especially with all these FanDuel and DraftKings. And they're not only in baseball, you see them in football so much now. It's almost a little disgusting.
It is.
Everywhere you read, it's DraftKings, FanDuel. You know there's something more than meets the eye when a company like this is throwing millions of dollars around like they are. And again, maybe someday it'll get exposed for what it is. But for now, they're getting under this loophole type of deal.
And it's the amount of commercials that so I mean it's like they're bludgeoning you with to death with these things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just enough is enough.
Commanding you to get a DraftKings account so you can start losing money.
Yeah, it's just incredible, and how they go along with this. But we've discussed that it's that loophole. It doesn't involve the final score, so technically it's not betting. So,
yep, but it's betting on the outcome of players, which I think is even worse.
I agree. I don't know how it's not, but
yeah, I mean, actually, the mobsters and organized crime could probably get to single players easier than they could get to a whole team. How are you going to approach a whole team to throw a game? That's very hard to do. But if you single out one or two or three superstars and say, hey, tonight, we want you to, here's some money. We want you to have a bad night or whatever. That's not out of the realm.
And it's practically casinos in every city now, so I'm sure there's some guys in there that like to gamble that are not necessarily on baseball, but they're playing the horses or they're playing blackjack or they're betting on football or and who knows what they get into.
True, and they're not devoid of the fact that this exists out there either.
And it look, I'm not being a prude, I hope, but every team around March Madness, they have their picks like everybody else does, and they get into a pool, the baseball players as well. And what do you think that is? That's gambling. If you put $5 into a pool to enter for these March Madness, yet everybody condones that, it seems. So, I mean, that's pretty blatant stuff that's out there. I don't know. I just put Pete back in and let him try to get into the Hall of Fame and see what happens.
That's true. We'll have to see if that is the case. And Gary was telling me about an article to read if you're interested in the Washington Nationals fiasco that's just happened today. The articles are in the Washington Post, and they're a 3-part series called Destiny Denied, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. So if you want to read into some of that, that's a great place to start for you out there. And Gary, let's give a couple of our postseason picks here before the series start here. Who do you like in the Astros and Yankees?
You know what? I'm going to go with the Astros. I think they're going to pull the upset. I know I pronounced his name wrong, but that pitcher, Keuchel, he has been tough on the Yankees this year. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Astros are going to take care of them.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you on that. 8 p.m. start tomorrow night, October 6th in New York on ESPN. Wednesday night, we have the matchup we've been both looking for. Gary Arrieta, 22-6 against Cole. Garrett Cole at 19-8 for the Pirates. And who do you like in that one?
Wow, that's a tough one. I went to school by Pittsburgh, so I've got the certain part of me is rooting for Pittsburgh. But boy, Arrieta is so tough. My mother used to say a guy that was in a slump he's due when he comes up to hit. He's due. I'm going to say that Arietta is due, but due for a loss. So I'm
Oh,
going to go with Pittsburgh.
wow, that's a big one there. I'd have to go with the Cubs. I think they're waiting on this one. Arietta, I think, is going to have a great game, but I think it's the Cubs offense that are going to break out with their superstars to be Rizzo, Brian at third base has been pouring it on lately. A couple other Cubs as well. I'm going to go with the Cubs. And then Thursday night, we have more baseball. Actually, it hasn't been announced as a night game yet, but the Rangers and the Blue Jays.
Whew. Well, just off of face value, because I don't think they announced the time of the game or the pitchers in the game. Um,
David Price has been announced for the Blue Jays already.
well, that's good enough for me. I'm going to go with Mr. Price and the Blue Jays in that first game.
Yeah, and that, of course, is the division series, a 5-game series. So I guess the wild card games are more intense because they're only the uh, one game and done for a couple of these teams. Sort of a shame. But how about our last matchup that we know of for sure right now, the Mets and the Dodgers? I think I know who you're going to go for on this one.
I have to. I have to go with the Mets. Jacob DeGrom over Cranky or Kershaw, whoever they face first.
Yep, and that's going to be a great series. I remember a few years ago when the Phillies played the Dodgers, you basically look and wait for each pitch when your team is in the playoffs. So it's a game of inches, and you really learn that in the playoffs. It's just inning by inning, pitch by pitch, and just every little thing gets magnified in the playoffs like it is now. And that's for all the marbles. I'll have to join you. I'll root for the Mets as well.
That's good. and you'll have the Pepto by your side, as I will. The Pepto and the Tums and everything else for the
Yeah.
upstate stomachs that come. But
Yep. I don't know if I'll be able to catch the whole first game, but we'll have to see how much I can stay awake there before I get up the next morning to work. But we want to thank all our listeners for tuning in to this edition of MLB This Week. Again, send us an email. Let us know where you listen from. If you'd like, you can even sign on to our Patreon page and sponsor the show. About a cup of coffee a month is all we ask for, and we get some more listeners. We have some plans for the show over the off season and into next year, so we'd like to implement some of those plans, and we can do that very good with your help and support.
so don't forget to go there, patreon.com/MLB this week.
All right, Gary, you have a great week. Good luck to the Mets. We'll be talking to our listeners right after the first round of playoffs. We'll know who the wild card winners are by now. You have our picks. Hope they gel with yours. If not, we'll be talking about that as well. Talk to everybody next show, Gary. You have a great week.
Same to you, Rich. See you then.